The sun was setting over the city, casting a warm orange glow across the streets. Officer Jenna Morris, in her usual navy blue uniform, adjusted the rearview mirror of her patrol car as she cruised along the quiet downtown streets. Her K-9 partner, Rex, a German shepherd with a sleek, powerful build, sat beside her in the passenger seat, ears perked, his nose twitching at every new scent. It was the kind of calm day where the usual hum of traffic filled the air, but nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. The kind of day officers dream of when they're assigned to routine patrols. The radio crackled softly with an occasional dispatch, but there was no urgency, no call for action. Jenna's fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel as she took a left turn and slowly made her way down Main Street. It was a perfect day for a quiet patrol, one that could almost trick you into thinking the world was at peace. Jenna had almost forgotten what it felt like to be this relaxed. It had been weeks since anything noteworthy had happened in the area. She and Rex had been working together for years, and the partnership had become second nature. Rex had a sixth sense for detecting trouble, often finding things that escaped the eyes of even the most vigilant officers. But today, the day seemed almost too peaceful. They cruised past a corner bakery, the sweet scent of fresh pastries drifting through the open window of the squad car. Jenna smiled to herself, thinking about how she might swing by later to grab a warm croissant before heading home. That's when she saw it. A taxi was parked by the curb, idle with the engine off. It wasn't unusual to see a taxi stop in a busy area like this, but something about the way it sat there caught her attention. The vehicle was facing the wrong way on a one-way street, and it was not in a designated pickup or drop-off zone. It was minor, nothing to be concerned about, she told herself. But Rex, always so tuned to the smallest details, shifted beside her, his head snapping toward the vehicle. He stared intensely at the taxi for a moment, then let out a short, sharp bark. It wasn't a usual bark. It was demanding, full of purpose, as though Rex could sense something beyond what Jenna could see. Jenna's hand instinctively reached for the steering wheel, her body immediately alert. Rex's sudden reaction was enough to pull her attention from the mundane task of monitoring traffic. She glanced at him, his posture now rigid, his gaze locked on the taxi. He didn't take his eyes off the car, even as Jenna slowed the patrol car and pulled to a stop a few feet away. "Okay, boy, what's got you so worked up?" Jenna muttered under her breath. Rex let out another bark, this one louder than the first, and took a step toward the taxi. His tail was stiff, his ears perked in full attention. Jenna could feel her heart rate pick up, a small rush of adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. She knew Rex well enough to know this was no casual response. Something was off, and she wasn't about to ignore it. She parked the patrol car, grabbed her flashlight, and slipped it into her belt. "Let's check it out, Rex," she said quietly, her voice firm, though she wasn't sure what she was about to find. Whatever it was, Rex was certain something needed attention, and that was all she needed to know. Jenna stepped out of the car, Rex right by her side, his paws clicking on the pavement. Together, they approached the parked taxi. But it wasn't just any ordinary traffic stop. Something about this felt different. As Jenna and Rex approached the taxi, the driver's eyes flicked nervously between the dog and the officer. The man was in his mid-50s, his face weathered by years of working long shifts behind the wheel. He stood by the open door of the taxi, holding a half-empty coffee cup in his trembling hands. His gaze darted from Rex's unblinking stare to Jenna's cautious but steady eyes. Rex was acting strangely, his body tense and rigid, as if he had caught a scent on the wind, one that Jenna couldn't pick up. He wasn't wagging his tail or behaving like he usually did during a routine stop. Instead, his movements were deliberate, calculated, like he was zeroing in on something. His bark echoed again, louder this time, and Rex took another step forward, his nose almost touching the door of the cab. Jenna glanced at the driver, her hand still resting on the doorframe of the car. The man shifted his weight uneasily, his posture stiff as he tried to explain. Officer, I've just been waiting for a passenger. They told me to wait here while they grabbed something inside the store." His voice was steady, but the way his eyes kept darting around told Jenna that something wasn't adding up. Jenna didn't immediately respond. Instead, she nodded slowly, keeping her focus on Rex. She could feel the tension rising in the air. The dog was absolutely fixated on the back of the taxi, as though there was something hidden inside that needed to be found. "Where did they go?" Jenna asked, her voice firm but not confrontational. "Who's the passenger you're waiting on?" The man hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the door of the store, then back to her. "Just someone from the neighborhood. They're taking a bit longer than expected." He let out a nervous chuckle, but it didn't sound genuine. Maybe they're just picking up a few things. Jenna narrowed her eyes, studying the driver. There was something about the way he avoided her gaze that sent a prickling sensation down her spine. She was no stranger to the small, nervous gestures people made when they were hiding something, shifting from foot to foot, avoiding eye contact, speaking too quickly. It was a language she knew well from years on the force. Rex's bark interrupted her thoughts again, sharp and insistent. Without a word, he lunged forward, pulling Jenna toward the back of the taxi. The dog's nose was already pressed against the window, his tail stiff with alertness. Jenna felt her pulse quicken as she followed Rex's lead. She leaned in close, peering through the fogged window, trying to make out what lay inside the backseat. Rex barked again, this time with more urgency. His body was practically vibrating with excitement, as if he had found exactly what he was searching for. Jenna hesitated for a split second, her instincts telling her to be cautious. But then she pushed the door open slightly, her flashlight illuminating the interior of the taxi. The light flickered as she shone it onto the back seat. A blanket, carelessly tossed over something, or someone, moved just a fraction. Rex's growl deepened, a low rumble in his throat. Jenna's eyes widened as the blanket shifted again, revealing a small figure curled up underneath it. She felt a tight knot form in her stomach, a feeling of unease settling in her chest. Her heart skipped a beat as she carefully pulled the blanket back to reveal what lay hidden underneath. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat, and for a moment, everything else around her seemed to blur. Rex stood still, his posture unyielding, watching as Jenna made the discovery. Something was very wrong here, and Jenna was certain that Rex had known it all along. Jenna took a step back, her heart racing. The small figure in the back seat, a child, was completely still, tucked under the blanket. The child's eyes were wide open, staring blankly ahead, and there was a soft, almost inaudible sound of shallow breathing. Jenna's fingers trembled slightly as she brushed a strand of hair from the child's face. A chill ran down her spine. The man who had been standing by the car finally moved, his hand still clutching the coffee cup, his voice trembling as he spoke. I didn't know she would leave him there. I didn't know." His words were rushed, his breath quickening, as though he was struggling to find the right explanation, to justify himself. Jenna straightened up, her eyes locking with his. The man was visibly panicked now, his face pale. He was a man in his mid-50s, wearing a faded jacket and a pair of well-worn boots. His hand shook as he set the coffee down on the roof of the taxi, his face contorting with guilt or fear. Jenna couldn't tell which. "What do you mean you didn't know?" Jenna asked sharply, her voice controlled but firm. Rex was still by her side, his body tense, his focus unwavering as he stood beside the taxi, eyes fixed on the man. Jenna was beginning to feel a sinking sensation in her stomach. Something was seriously off, and she needed to get to the bottom of it. The driver ran a hand through his thinning hair, his eyes flicking nervously between the child and Jenna. He hesitated before speaking again, his voice barely above a whisper. "The woman. She asked me to keep him safe. She said she needed to buy food. She promised she'd be right back. I didn't think it was going to be this long." Jenna's gaze softened slightly as she glanced back at the child, still curled up in the back seat. She could tell that the boy had been left alone for longer than he should have been. His clothes were disheveled, his small hands gripping tightly to a stuffed animal. Jenna's instincts told her that something wasn't adding up. How long has she been gone? Jenna pressed, her voice steady, but her mind racing to piece together the story. The driver wiped his brow with the back of his hand, still looking unsettled. Maybe an hour. I wasn't keeping track. I just thought she'd be back soon. But she hasn't come back yet. I swear, officer, I didn't know. Jenna's eyes narrowed as she watched him, trying to determine whether the man was telling the truth or if he was hiding something. There was a sense of confusion in his voice, but it wasn't enough to ease the unease bubbling in her chest. Why had he allowed a child to be left in his cab for so long? Why hadn't he taken action when he realized something was wrong? She turned to Rex, who continued to stand perfectly still beside her. The dog's gaze was fixed on the backseat, and his tail remained rigid, not relaxing for a second. Rex had no reason to doubt what he was sensing, and Jenna knew that meant something was wrong. "Where is she?" Jenna asked, her voice sharp now. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The driver swallowed hard, his eyes darting around in panic. I don't know. She just disappeared into the store. I thought she was getting food for him." Jenna's patience was wearing thin. "You said she promised she'd be right back. Did she leave any contact information? Did she tell you her name?" The driver shook his head slowly, looking more and more lost with each passing moment. "She didn't leave anything. She just went in there. She said she wouldn't be long." The silence stretched for a few seconds, broken only by the soft hum of the street and the occasional passing car. Jenna's thoughts raced. A child alone in a taxi. A woman gone without a trace. Something wasn't right. Her mind made the connection. It wasn't just about a child left behind in a taxi. It was about a mother in distress, possibly in trouble, and a child who had been abandoned in a way that wasn't accidental. Jenna wasn't going to let this go. There were too many unanswered questions, and she wasn't leaving until she had answers. "Stay here," Jenna said, her voice firm, as she turned to walk back toward her patrol car. She reached for her radio, her hand steady despite the storm of questions in her mind. This was far from over. Jenna quickly walked back to her patrol car, her mind racing. She grabbed the radio and keyed it in, calling in the situation. "Dispatch, this is Officer Morris. I need immediate backup at Main and 6th. A child is in the back of a taxi. The driver claims the mother went into the store over an hour ago, but we can't reach her. The child appears to be neglected, and I need assistance here now." The dispatcher's voice came through quickly, confirming the request for backup. Jenna snapped her radio back onto her belt and turned to Rex, who was still standing guard beside the taxi. The dog's posture was unwavering, as if he could sense the growing urgency of the situation. She felt her heartbeat quicken as she glanced back at the backseat. The child was still there, silent and still. Something about the way the small form lay curled up under the blanket sent an uncomfortable shiver down Jenna's spine. She hadn't seen movement from the child for a while, and that alone made her uneasy. Jenna crouched down by the open door, her eyes scanning the back seat more carefully now. The dim light from the street lamps barely illuminated the interior, but as she peered into the vehicle, her gaze was drawn to the soft rise and fall of the child's chest. Shallow, but steady. A sigh of relief escaped her lips, but it was brief. She reached inside, her fingers brushing against the blanket. The fabric felt cold to the touch. It had been poorly thrown over the child, with no real care or consideration for warmth. Jenna hesitated for a moment, her mind still running through the series of questions and possibilities. Something wasn't right. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered situations where people pretended everything was fine, when in reality, a child's safety was being compromised. But this felt different. Something about the mother's disappearance, the nervousness of the driver, and Rex's persistent reaction told her this wasn't an innocent mistake. Jenna gently pulled back the blanket, her heart racing as she prepared to uncover whatever lay hidden beneath it. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The child was a little boy, no older than 2 or 3. His dark brown eyes were wide open, staring at nothing in particular. His cheeks were slightly flushed, but there was a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead, and his clothes were wrinkled and dirty. His tiny hands were clenched around a small, worn teddy bear that looked like it had seen better days. The stuffed animal was covered in dust, but it seemed to be the only comfort the child had. Jenna felt her chest tighten at the sight. The boy's face was pale, and his lips were dry, a hint of dehydration in his expression. He wasn't crying, but there was a look of quiet confusion in his eyes, as though he couldn't quite understand where his mother had gone, or why he was left alone in the back of a cab for so long. Rex, sensing the growing concern, gave a soft whine and nudged the child's foot gently with his nose. The boy didn't react, but Jenna saw the faintest twitch in his fingers. He was alive, but barely hanging on. Jenna's mind raced as she took in the scene. She felt a deep pit form in her stomach. She had to act fast. Her mind quickly shifted gears. The mother had left the child behind, deliberately or by accident. She couldn't be sure. Either way, Jenna couldn't leave the child here any longer. She quickly glanced back at the driver, who was standing several feet away now, clearly shaken. His nervous glances between the child and her only confirmed that there was something he wasn't saying. "Is there anything you're not telling me?" Jenna asked, her voice sharp but controlled. The driver flinched slightly, as if the question had hit too close to home. "I swear, I didn't know," he began again, but his voice trailed off. His eyes welled up with tears as he struggled to maintain composure. "I didn't know she would leave him. I didn't know it would be like this. She seemed desperate. She said she would be back. I didn't want to stop her." Jenna took a deep breath, her mind running through her next steps. She needed to ensure the child was safe, and fast. Her fingers moved quickly to her radio again. "Dispatch, I need medical assistance immediately. There's a child in distress in the back of a taxi at Main and 6th. I need a paramedic here now." The dispatcher's voice was calm, confirming that help was on the way. Jenna glanced at Rex, who was still standing by the taxi, his gaze locked on the boy as if to protect him from any harm. Jenna knew this was far from over. She was about to uncover the truth behind the mother's disappearance, and nothing would stop her from finding out what had really happened. It didn't take long for the sirens to approach, growing louder as the paramedics neared the scene. Jenna stayed by the taxi, never taking her eyes off the child in the backseat. The boy was still motionless, but Jenna could see the faint rise and fall of his chest. He was alive, but just barely. Her mind raced with questions. Why had the mother left him? Where had she gone, and why hadn't she returned? She glanced at the driver, still standing in the same spot, wringing his hands together in visible distress. He seemed genuinely terrified now, his earlier nervousness giving way to something deeper, guilt perhaps, or fear of the consequences. Jenna wasn't sure which, but the situation felt like it was spiraling. Just then, a familiar voice called out from the distance. It was frantic, almost breathless. "Oh my God, where is he? Where is my baby?" Jenna turned toward the sound, her eyes narrowing as a young woman emerged from the nearby store. Her clothes were disheveled, her hair unkempt, and she was running toward the taxi with a look of sheer panic etched on her face. She looked no older than 25, and the desperation in her eyes was unmistakable. The woman's voice cracked as she neared the taxi. "Please, where's my son? Please, someone help me." She was almost sobbing now, her steps quickening as she made her way toward the vehicle. Jenna stepped forward, blocking her path. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone firm, though she could sense the woman's fear and distress. The woman stopped short, her chest heaving, as she tried to catch her breath. I'm his mother," the woman gasped, her voice shaky. "I was just inside the store. I promised I'd be back soon, but I couldn't find anything to buy. I thought I'd be back in time. Please, where is he?" Jenna's eyes softened for a moment. The woman looked devastated, but her explanation seemed genuine, too genuine to be a lie. But that still didn't answer the bigger questions. Why had she left the child alone in the first place? And why had she taken so long? "Where have you been?" Jenna asked, her voice softening but still laced with concern. "Your son's been alone in that taxi for over an hour. Why didn't you call for help sooner?" The woman flinched, her eyes welling up with tears as she shook her head. "I didn't mean to leave him so long. Things happened. I'm struggling, officer. I've been trying to get back on my feet. I thought I could get food for us, but everything is so expensive, and I don't have enough." Her voice cracked, and she broke down into sobs. Jenna stood still, absorbing the woman's words, trying to process what she was hearing. The woman seemed overwhelmed, far too fragile for the situation she was in. It was clear she had been trying her best, but the circumstances were far beyond her control. As the woman collapsed onto her knees beside the taxi, reaching out to touch the door, Jenna felt a wave of sympathy rush over her. She hadn't known what kind of story she would find when she first saw the child, but this was a new kind of heartbreak. It wasn't the neglect of a careless parent. It was the overwhelming pressure of life crashing down on a person who was struggling to survive. Jenna stepped forward, kneeling beside the woman. "You're here now. That's what matters," she said quietly, trying to comfort her. "Let's get your son checked out." Just as Jenna spoke, the paramedics arrived, rushing to the scene with their medical equipment. They quickly moved the woman aside, their hands gently lifting the child from the backseat. The boy was still unresponsive, but he was alive, barely. His small chest was rising and falling slowly, but there was a definite look of distress on his face, as though his body was starting to shut down from the lack of care. The mother's sobs grew louder as she watched them work. "Is he going to be okay?" she whispered, her voice filled with terror. "Please, don't let him be hurt." Jenna looked at the paramedics, who were moving quickly and efficiently. One of them looked up briefly, nodding. "He'll be fine, but we need to get him to the hospital right away. He's dehydrated and weak, but we can treat him." The mother's eyes filled with relief, but there was still a deep sadness in them. She had failed her child in ways she didn't know how to fix, and Jenna knew that the road ahead for her wasn't going to be easy. As the paramedics loaded the child into the ambulance, the woman turned to Jenna, her face pleading. "Please, officer, don't take him away from me. I need him. He's all I have left." Jenna hesitated for a moment, looking at the woman, then at the ambulance. She knew that for now, the child needed medical care, but the bigger question was what would happen next. This wasn't over. There was more to this story than just a mother in distress. The sound of the ambulance's sirens faded into the night as it sped toward the hospital, and Jenna stood there, watching the scene unfold before her. The mother, still kneeling on the pavement, wiped away her tears as she watched her son being taken away. Her eyes were red, her face a mixture of relief and devastation. There was so much more to this story than a simple case of neglect. Jenna could feel it. She turned back to the driver, who was now leaning against his taxi, looking completely drained. His face was pale, and his hands were still shaking, but there was an almost defeated look in his eyes. Jenna knew she needed answers. The situation didn't add up. There were too many gaps in the mother's story, too many unanswered questions. She took a step toward the man, her voice steady but firm. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened," she said. "Everything. Now." The driver swallowed hard, his gaze flickering between the ground and Jenna's intense stare. "I already told you," he mumbled, his voice weak. "She asked me to wait with him, just for a little while. She promised she'd be back soon." Jenna crossed her arms, watching him carefully. "And you didn't think it was strange? A woman leaving a child alone in your taxi for that long?" The driver's face tightened, a flicker of something resembling guilt crossing his features. "She seemed desperate. She didn't have much. She told me she was just trying to get something for the boy to eat. She kept saying how hard things had been. And I didn't want to make things worse for her. I thought she just needed a moment." He paused, then shook his head, clearly torn. "I should have done something. I should have called someone sooner, but she kept promising she'd be right back. I didn't want to make her mad or cause trouble." She looked like she was really struggling. Jenna's brow furrowed as she listened to him. Something wasn't right, but his story was consistent with what the mother had said. Still, there was more to uncover. "You said she was struggling," Jenna repeated. "What exactly did she mean by that? Was there something going on that you're not telling me?" The driver hesitated, looking down at his feet, almost as though he was weighing whether or not to speak. Finally, he met her gaze, his eyes filled with uncertainty. She told me that she was going through some personal stuff. I didn't ask for details, but she mentioned she had no one else to turn to. She didn't want to go to a shelter for help, said it was too dangerous. I thought maybe she was just scared of something." He paused again, clearly uncomfortable. "She seemed so lost. I thought if I could help her in some way, I'd do it. But I didn't realize it would go this far. I didn't know she would leave him." Jenna's mind raced as she processed his words. The mention of shelters, the fear of something dangerous, and the woman's desperation. It painted a picture of a mother in a vulnerable, fragile state. But that didn't explain everything. Why hadn't the driver contacted anyone when things started to feel wrong? Why hadn't he reached out to the authorities sooner? She looked at him, narrowing her eyes. "You should have called for help," she said firmly. "You didn't just let this happen. You ignored the signs, and now a child is in danger because of it." The driver looked down, his face reddening with shame. "I know. I messed up." Jenna exhaled sharply, her eyes scanning the scene around her. She could hear the distant sound of the ambulance's sirens as it drove farther away. The woman's child was in good hands now, but the bigger questions were still hanging in the air. What was really going on here? Why had this mother felt so desperate? What was she running from? Her gut told her that this wasn't just a simple case of neglect. There was something deeper here, something hidden behind the desperation, the fear, and the secrecy. Jenna turned her attention back to the driver. "I need you to come with me," she said. "We're going to the station to get your statement. I want to know everything, starting from the moment she got into your cab." The driver nodded silently, still trembling, as he climbed into the front seat of the patrol car. Jenna followed, her mind now fully focused on finding the answers. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The ride to the station was silent, save for the faint hum of the patrol car's engine and the soft crunch of the tires on the wet asphalt. Jenna kept her gaze focused on the road ahead, her thoughts racing. There was a gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach, a sense that something much larger was unfolding behind the surface of this seemingly simple case. The driver, still visibly shaken, sat quietly beside her, his eyes downcast, his hands tightly gripping his knees. He hadn't said a word since Jenna had ordered him into the patrol car. His silence was telling. He knew he was in trouble, and yet Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than what he was letting on. She needed him to open up completely if she was going to figure out the truth. As they pulled up to the station, Jenna's mind drifted back to the boy, barely clinging to life when the paramedics had taken him away. His mother's tear-streaked face haunted her thoughts. There was a desperation in that woman's eyes, but it wasn't just a mother's worry. It was something deeper, something that hinted at a past full of scars that hadn't healed. Jenna parked the car, getting out and motioning for the driver to follow her. He obeyed, his steps slow, as though every movement weighed him down. Inside the station, Jenna led him to an interrogation room. She motioned for him to sit at the table. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the room. Jenna stood across from him, her arms crossed as she prepared for the next phase of questioning. The driver looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of dread and regret. "What do you want to know?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jenna leaned forward slightly, her tone firm but calm. "I want the truth," she said. "And I want it now. Tell me everything. From the moment you picked her up to the last time you saw her. Don't leave anything out." The driver swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Okay, I'll tell you everything," he said, his voice shaking. He hesitated, then began, his words spilling out in a rush. "I first saw her about 2 weeks ago. She was standing on the side of the road with the boy. She looked like she was waiting for a ride, but she didn't flag me down at first. I drove by, and something about her caught my eye. Her clothes were torn, and she looked just so lost. I don't know, I couldn't just drive past her." Jenna's brow furrowed as she listened. "You didn't ask any questions. You just picked her up." The driver nodded. "Yeah, I know it sounds weird, but I don't know why I did it. Something in my gut told me to stop. So I turned around and went back. She was so grateful when I stopped, like she'd been waiting for someone to notice her. She told me she didn't have money, but she just needed a ride." Jenna continued listening carefully, trying to piece together the timeline. "And what happened after that?" The driver sighed, running his hand over his face. "We talked as I drove. She told me she was struggling. She had just moved to the area, said her ex-husband had disappeared and left her with nothing. She didn't have anyone else to turn to. She said she couldn't get a job because of her record. I didn't ask what that meant, but she said it like it was something everyone knew about her." Jenna's attention sharpened. A criminal record. This was a detail the driver had left out earlier. She pressed on, her voice steady. "What did she say about her record?" The driver hesitated again. "She didn't go into detail, but she was scared, officer. She said she couldn't trust anyone, not even shelters. She seemed paranoid, always looking over her shoulder. It made me nervous." Jenna felt a chill run down her spine. A woman with a criminal past, trying to protect her child from something, yet still leaving him alone in a taxi for over an hour. The pieces were slowly coming together, but something about the woman's story still didn't sit right. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this. Did she mention anyone else? Any reason why she didn't want to go to the police or a shelter? Jenna asked, her voice a little quieter now, as she tried to follow the trail. The driver paused before answering, his face contorting with concern. "She said she was running from someone. A man. I don't know who he was, but she seemed terrified. I think she thought he might find her again." Jenna's heart skipped a beat. A man. This was new information. Her thoughts swirled as the driver's words echoed in her mind. A man from her past. Whoever he was, it was clear he had cast a long shadow over this woman's life. And now, the question remained, had he found her again? And what did that mean for her child? Jenna sat back in her chair, absorbing the driver's words, her mind working overtime to connect the dots. A man, someone from the mother's past, was out there, and she was terrified that he might have found her. But the bigger question was why? Why hadn't she gone to the authorities? Why hadn't she reached out for help sooner? Jenna needed answers, and the pieces were finally starting to come together, but there was still so much she didn't understand. The driver seemed to sense Jenna's growing frustration. "I didn't know what to do," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I didn't know who to trust. She was scared, and I didn't want to make things worse. She told me she was just trying to protect her son from someone. She said she was doing the best she could, but I think she was running from this man. She didn't say much, but I could tell she was terrified." Jenna leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Did she give you any idea where she was going? Did she tell you anything else about the man?" The driver shook his head, his eyes downcast. "No, she just kept saying that she needed to get away, that no one would help her. She didn't want her son to grow up in a world like this. But I don't know. I just know she was scared. She begged me not to call the police. She said if I did, she might lose him for good." Jenna exhaled slowly, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. It wasn't just a simple case of neglect. It was much deeper, much darker than that. There was a threat out there, one that was haunting the woman and her son. And now, it was her job to find out who this man was and what he wanted. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden sound of a phone ringing. Jenna quickly pulled her phone from her belt, glancing at the screen. It was the hospital. Her heart skipped a beat. "Officer Morris," she answered, her voice steady. "Jenna, we've got an update on the child," the voice on the other end said. "The boy's condition is stabilizing. He's still under observation, but he's awake and responsive now. However, there's something else you need to know. We ran his mother's name through the system. She's got a history, multiple arrests for domestic violence and drug possession. But that's not the shocking part. It's the fact that she's been in hiding for years. She's been on the run." Jenna's pulse quickened. This was it. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. "What do you mean, on the run?" Jenna asked, her voice sharp. The hospital staff member paused for a moment before continuing. "We found a connection to an old case, an abusive relationship. The man she's been hiding from is a convicted criminal, wanted for multiple charges. We believe he's been actively looking for her for a while. And it gets worse. The boy. He's not just her son. He's also the son of a man named Marco Reyes. He's a known gang leader with a long rap sheet. We believe this woman has been trying to protect her son from his father's dangerous world." Jenna felt a chill run down her spine as the weight of the revelation hit her. Marco Reyes, a violent criminal, someone who had terrorized this woman for years. It all made sense now. The fear, the desperation, the secrecy. The mother had been doing everything she could to keep her son out of the dangerous world his father was a part of, and it seemed that she had been running for her life. "Where is she now?" Jenna asked, urgency creeping into her voice. The hospital staff member's voice was filled with concern. "She's gone, Jenna. She disappeared as soon as she got word that her son was stable. We're not sure where she's gone, but we're trying to track her down. The mother's been in hiding for so long, we can't be sure if she'll stay put this time." Jenna's mind was spinning. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The mother had been trying to protect her son from a criminal father, someone who had been actively hunting her down for years. And now she had vanished again, just when they were so close to finding out the truth. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Jenna said quickly, her determination growing. She hung up the phone and turned to the driver. "You can go now, but don't leave town. We might need you again." As the driver shuffled out of the room, Jenna stood up, her mind already racing ahead. This case had taken a dark turn, and the stakes were higher than ever. Marco Reyes wasn't just a threat to the mother. He was a threat to her son, and he was out there somewhere, hunting them down. Jenna knew that if she didn't find them soon, it could be too late. She wasn't going to let that happen.